So since we are a small group, and this is hopefully going to be a bit of a participatory workshop, it would be great if people want to turn their cameras on so we can see everyone and say hi. I don't know if people who do have their cameras on, who are here, want to briefly introduce themselves. Since we're a smaller, more intimate group, and this is less of a talk and more of a participatory workshop. Barry, do you want to maybe, can I ask you to start?
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening, everybody. My name is Barry Berland. I'm in London. I would consider myself a bit of a Yiddishist. I know next to nothing about Ladino, so I thought this would be a fantastic way to at least learn an hour's worth of basics, but I can cover both sides of the Jewish world. Shirley, I'm sorry that I missed your lecture series about a year ago on migration, which I think would have been fantastic historical context for this. But yeah, historical context aside, I'm happy to get into the linguistics.
Great.
Hello, Carlos. I'm very happy to be hearing from you on the subject, which is yeah, a niggling little interest.
Hi, Barry. Thanks for coming.
Excellent. Glad to have you here. David, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm coming in from Lisbon, and I currently run the Chabad Library in Cascais, and deal all the time with Ladino, and I'm interested to follow. I know Portuguese reasonably, but Ladino only the songs. So I'm interested to make contact with you and see what's going on.
Excellent. Thank you, David, for attending.
Brian, would you like to? No obligation. If you're happier not to, that's totally fine. Okay, well, so welcome to everybody to tonight's talk, or today, depending on where you're joining us from. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Shirley Gilbert. I'm Professor of Modern Jewish History at University College London, and I'm also the Director of the Sir Martin Gilbert Learning Centre, which, as you all know, was established in memory of the late British historian. And we offer quite a wide program of events on the many subjects that Sir Martin spent his life exploring. Tonight's workshop is possibly a little different from what we normally present. We haven't ever presented anything on the subject of Ladino before, so it's really wonderful to be able to welcome my colleague, Dr. Carlos Yebra López, to come and give this workshop. He's a UKRI postdoctoral fellow in my department, which is the Department of Hebrew and Jewish Studies at UCL. And his research focuses on the revitalization of Ladino by digital means. And he proposed to us to give this introductory workshop to Ladino, which is part of a larger project, an engagement project that he's running at UCL, which perhaps he'll tell us a little bit more about. The format for tonight's event, as I was suggesting at the beginning, we're thinking of this really as an informal workshop. Carlos has a lot to tell you and to share with you. But if you have questions, things you'd like to ask or interrupt him about, please feel free to do so. I'm going to be watching the chat and the participants list. So if you want to put your hand up or if you want to chat, I will convey those comments through to Carlos. Otherwise, he will speak, share some slides with us, and there will also be time at the end for questions if people have them. Without any further ado, let me pass over to Carlos now.
Thank you, Shirley. Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I would like to thank Professor Shirley Gilbert for accepting my request to present here today and to share this workshop with you. Dr. Bethany Gaunt for coordinating, and the Sir Martin Gilbert Learning Center for hosting this workshop. And so without further ado, I would like to share my screen to begin the workshop. As Shirley said, any questions, please raise your hand or write in the chat, and she will filter those questions. And this is part of a larger project called London Ladino, co-creating Judeo-Spanish voices with local Sephardic Jews. So the idea is, as Shirley rightly explained, that this is going to be a participatory workshop where I'm seeking your feedback as much as you are listening to me and learning about Ladino. So I'm very interested in getting to know the local London community of Sephardic Jews and their knowledge and relationship vis-a-vis Ladino. I know that the majority of Sephardic Jews in London come from the so-called Western Sephardim as opposed to the Eastern Sephardim, which is why we thought it would make sense to make a project trying to bridge that gap between the Ladino from Eastern Sephardim and Western Sephardim in London. Now, this project, London Ladino, is part itself of the Bacon Bursary, sponsored by UCL Engagement, which again tries to bridge the gap between UCL as an institution and the broader Ladino, the broader London community. And so I am the lead of the project, and I have two co-applicants that help me out, who are Alejandro, Acero, Ayuda, and Lisek, whom I will introduce. So, as I said, the team is us three. And in addition to working at UCL as a postdoctoral researcher, like Shirley said, I'm also the executive director of Ladino 21, which is a community interest company that seeks to show how Ladino is spoken in the 21st century. I also teach Ladino at Oxford University. And my colleagues are Alejandro Acero Ayuda, who is a PhD researcher on Ladino at the University of Oregon, and Lisek, who is also at the UCL Hebrew and Jewish Studies Department, and is a research assistant at the Institute for Jewish Policy Research. So this is what I would like to share with you. But as we said, as Shirley pointed out, any questions, please feel free to interrupt me and I'll be happy to try and answer them. I can't promise I will answer them, but I will try to do so. So, first of all, what is Ladino? This is both the most basic and the most complicated question. So we can start with a working definition by saying that Ladino, also known as Judeo-Spanish or Judeo-Spanish or Judesmo or Español or Españolit or Nuestro Español and many other glottonyms, is the language spoken by the Jews who were expelled from the Iberian Peninsula in 1492. You may have noticed that I've written this slide in Ladino, which is to give you a little bit of a taste about the language. You'll be seeing this pattern in other slides. Now, of course, this is Romanized Ladino, which is only a relatively recent trend in historical terms. So, most of the Ladino speakers settled around the Mediterranean in the territory that you see pointed out in the red arrow, so around the Mediterranean basin. And most Ladino speakers nowadays, even though it is of course a diasporic community, most of them reside in either Israel or United States, also Turkey and France mostly. But then again, it's a global language. Now, some basic facts about Ladino. We can speak about Ladino, and Ladino has been discussed as an object since the interaction of the Jews with the Roman population of the Iberian Peninsula. Before the expulsion of 1492, Ladino was mostly a calque, meaning a word-by-word translation of the Hebrew Bible. And that minhag, that custom, was known as fazer en Ladino, meaning to translate into Ibero-Romance. That's where the name comes from. Now, after the expulsion, what we see is slowly but steadily in the 16th and 17th century, the creation of a vernacular spoken language, which is what we nowadays know mainly as Ladino. So when we speak about Ladino nowadays, we're making reference to that spoken language, to that vernacular that is created by koinization as a koine, as a lingua franca in the Mediterranean basin. That's what we mean when we speak about Ladino nowadays, not so much the word-by-word calque from the Hebrew Bible. So within that vernacular, we have two main dialects. We have Judesmo, which is the Eastern Mediterranean dialect, mostly centered around Saloniki, historically, at least until World War II and the Holocaust, of course, and then Istanbul. These were the two main centers of Judesmo. And then we have Haketia, which was developed in the north of Morocco and contains obviously many more loanwords from Arabic, and it's orthographically closer to modern Spanish for geographical reasons. So for the purpose of this class, we will be talking about Ladino as if it were just Judesmo, as if it were just the spoken vernacular of the Eastern Mediterranean. Okay, but just know that Ladino is much more ample. It may also refer to that word-by-word translation, to Haketia, to Judesmo, etc. Right? So we do an oversimplification in this workshop, and we call it Judesmo, and we just make reference to that Eastern Mediterranean spoken language. Historically, Ladino was written in many different scripts, which is obscured by the fact that nowadays you see it primarily in the Latin alphabet. So that makes for a presentist bias, according to which people tend to think that it was always the case that Ladino was primarily written in the Latin alphabet, but nothing could be farther from the truth. We know that 70% of text approximately in the Sephardic diaspora were written in Rashi, meaning the semi-cursive Hebrew script used by Sephardic Jews. The cursive, meaning the handwritten, will be the solitreo. Then we also have the square one, the merubah. And you can also find some text in Cyrillic, including Serbian and Bulgarian Cyrillic, which are not exactly the same, as you know. In Arabic and in Greek, I found one or two texts also in the Greek alphabet in Ladino. Now, today, it's hard to estimate how many speakers of Ladino there are. According to UNESCO, it's 100,000. I think that is a very generous estimate. I will probably say between 30,000 and 50,000. Of course, Ladino is a Hispanic language in the sense that the base of the language, the adstrato, is either Romance, right? What nowadays we know as Castilian, Catalan, Galician, Portuguese, etc. But it's not Spanish, right? In the sense that it's not the same as Peninsular Spanish. Whether that different allows us to distinguish these two as two separate languages or one as a dialect of a major language, that is kind of social, cultural, political question rather than a strictly linguistic one, right? Let's just say that it's not better or worse than Spanish, it's simply different. So far, so good. Any questions? Demandicas? I think I cover a lot of material there and there might be questions. Shirley, do you want me to read from the chat?
Sure, go ahead. Although, you know what, Carlos, I'm not sure if other people are seeing it, but I can see a big black box in the middle of your screen, which is probably the chat jumping up.
Oh, yes, it is the chat. Yeah, okay, thank you for that. Yeah, let me just put it to the side. Can you now see it?
No.
Yes, it's moved over now. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So the comment is, I once watched a documentary about solitreo. Is it true that at some point each Sephardic community in Spain has its own form of solitreo until rabbis from different cities struggle to understand each other's letters? That might or might have not been the case. That belongs to a time that is prior to the explosion, so it's very far removed from my area of expertise. But we're going to see some more details about solitreo right now as part of this section of three main alphabets. So let me see if that answers your question. At any rate, there is, of course, great variation within solitreo as a handwritten script. Any handwritten script is going to have great variation, right? So solitreo is really, really hard to read, and there are not many scholars that can read it. Even experts in Ladino, I'm talking about Rabbi Eliezer Papo or Rachel Bornik, are not themselves familiar with solitreo. So, okay, so the main alphabet in which Ladino is nowadays written is, of course, the Latin alphabet. Let me just close the chat here window. And here are the similarities and differences, right? So in golden color or brown, you can see the letters that are exactly written the same way and pronounced the same way. In red, you can see the letters that exist in Ladino, but not in modern Spanish, such as the J, as in Djokovic or Judeo. That sound exists in Ladino, but not in modern Spanish, right? That would be the Gimel with Rafe in Hebrew script. And Y, of course, we use the ñ in Spanish as opposed to NY, but it's the same sound. The sh does not exist in modern Spanish, but it exists in Ladino through the shin, right? Sh, or the samech in certain ways. And finally, we have letters that are pronounced differently, exist in both Ladino and modern Spanish, but are pronounced very differently. So in modern Spanish, the H is silent, right? If I say hola, I write an H, but I don't pronounce it. I pronounce it as if it were written without the H, right? Hola. Here in Ladino, however, we do pronounce it almost like a het, right? So haber, which means news, is like that. It's haber, haber, or haham, right? That is the ha pronunciation. So it's not silent by any means. Then we have the J, which is the ha, the same sound that I just pronounced, is instantiated with the letter J in modern Spanish, but that very J is pronounced like a zayin with rafe in Ladino. So it's J, fija, fija, meaning daughter, or fijo, jo, meaning son. And then we have the V, which is fricative. You have to put your teeth over your lower lip and do a v, viejo. It's almost like an F, viejo, viejo. But that difference between the V and the B sound was lost in modern Spanish. So in modern Spanish, when there's a word with V, like Valencia, it's pronounced exactly like Barcelona. It's the B sound in both cases. Whereas in Ladino, there is the P sound for the B, as in Barcelona. But if it's a V, then it's fricative. It's V, V. So we say viejo in modern Spanish, but viejo in Ladino. And finally, the Z, which is a zayin, obviously, in Ladino. So it's this sound. And it's very different in modern Spanish. So this word present is presente, presente, presente in Ladino. If you were to read it in modern Spanish, it will be presente, presente, right? The pronunciation of that letter. Okay. Questions about this equivalencies or lack thereof in the Latin alphabet between modern Spanish and Ladino? That's the comparison I was making.
Carlos, can you just maybe say a little bit more? Maybe this is jumping ahead to what you'll talk about later, but you're talking about the overlaps in pronunciation with Spanish, but can you maybe say a little bit, maybe with relation to these words, with the meanings of the words themselves or the words themselves?
Yes, yeah. I mean, concerning lexically, concerning words themselves, the main differences between Ladino and modern Spanish are going to be Hebrew words, Aramaic words, and Turkish words. Then there are words from other languages such as French, Italian, Catalan, etc., but those can be mutually intelligible in many cases, whereas those that come from Hebrew or Aramaic or Turkish are not going to be intelligible. So for instance, haber, right, with a B, it's a Turkish word, right, for news. Or with a V, haber, as in colleague, right, is a Hebrew word. Those words will not be understood by somebody whose first language is modern Spanish, that doesn't have any knowledge of Turkish or Hebrew or Ladino. Let me see if we have other examples. No, the rest of the words that you can see here would be understood by somebody whose first language is Spanish, right? So nona, for instance, we don't use it in modern Spanish, but we know it comes from Italian, and yeah, most people would understand it. And the rest of the words are just differently pronounced in some cases, but not enough that it would be impossible to understand for a modern Spanish speaker. Okay, now, when we also use Rashi, as I said, this was the main script in which Ladino was written in diaspora, 70% of texts written in Rashi. Mostly so Rashi is semi-cursive, right? It's not as formal as the square letters, merubah, but it's not as informal as the cursive, solitreo. It's somewhere in between. So it's used for comments on the Torah or for journalistic texts, or for popular literature, for instance, El Principico, The Little Prince, right, etc. So most newspapers in Ladino, say those published in Greece or Turkey or current Austria, were almost always invariably published in Rashi letters. And these are the Rashi letters that you can see here. You can also see a small circle on the right side and letters there. Those are Solitreo equivalencies to the Rashi letters. Solitreo being the cursive script used by Sephardim between the 16th and the 19th century in the lands of the Ottoman Empire, right? So these are completely different registers. As I said, Rashi was for journalistic texts, comments on the Torah, etc., and literature, popular literature, whereas Solitreo, which is what you can see here, was used for more for private correspondence, shopping lists, everyday things, marginalia, etc. So it's a completely different register that opens a window to a completely different set of knowledge and ideas. So it is very interesting to know both Solitreo and Rashi, because we're likely to use them for different content, to unlock, to decipher different content. And there are lots and lots of letters, for instance, in the center, in the Jewish Museum Center in New York City, in Solitreo. There's a lot of letters written in Solitreo that nobody knows what they mean. Families donated them in the hopes that somebody will be able to decipher them, but there's so many and there's so few people who can read Solitreo. And it's so difficult to read letters, even if you are completely familiarized with what I'm showing to you, that most of them just remain without prescription. So yeah, this is just an approximation. It's easy to organize a table like this for Rashi, right? For a semi-cursive, let alone for a square type script. But when it comes to a cursive one, how do you write the bet is different from the way my mom writes the bet and I write the bet, right? So there's already differences amongst people that are very close between themselves. Now imagine across different centuries and different countries. The differences are wild. And obviously people, when they write in cursive letters, are sometimes in a rush, sometimes they run out of ink, things like that make it even more difficult to understand certain texts. Questions about the alphabets? Yeah, Barry?
Thanks, Carlos. Was this Solitreo script confined to Ladino, or did people write any Hebrew, if they ever wrote Hebrew, in the same letters?
So, yes, so this question, again, should be asked to a paleograph, ideally, but what I know is this. Solitreo originally was not used to write Ladino. It was used to write Judeo-Arabic in the Iberian Peninsula. And that's why among Sephardim is often known as ganchikos, meaning, I will write it in the chat, ganchikos, meaning little hooks, because the letters go down and up a lot like hooks. And a lot of people, when they see together a text in Solitreo, tell me, oh, this looks like Arabic. And the reason is that it was originally used to write Judeo-Arabic. So far as I know, it was used to write Judeo-Arabic and Ladino. No other language, so far as I know. Yeah. What else? Common words in Ladino. Common words in Ladino. These are some of the common words that we can see. I show this to my students at Oxford, and we typically use this. Obviously, the Javer is not really the way we'll use it. It's a bit adapted to the way somebody who doesn't know Rashi would write it. But other than that, the rest are pretty accurate. So let's see. Que Jaber Javerim is like saying what's up. It really means what's new, Jaber, right? Javerim, colleagues. But it's a way of saying what's new, what's up. So this is very much used in almost every conversation. Meldar, from meletare, whether it's ancient Castilian or Greek, both interpretations are accepted, means to read, meldar. Again, one of those words that wouldn't be understood by somebody who only speaks modern Spanish. Escribir, on the other hand, is pretty obvious. Then we have some words from Arabic, mashallah, which is very much used. Some French and Italian words, right? Like dunque from donc in French, or allora. When I say agora vamos a ver, is it also obvious to a modern Spanish speaker, right? What it means? It means now we're going to see, right? ¿Estás de acuerdo? ¿Cuál lo pensas? ¿Estás seguro? So we see some changes, like for instance, the absence of a diphthong is pensas instead of piensas, as in modern Spanish. The change from the C to the K, right? We say cualo with the K as opposed to a C. Adding an O, which was more common in pre-expulsion Castilian and Aragonese. So there are little changes here and there, but it's overall mutually intelligible. And then, of course, expressions in Hebrew like kol hakavod, which we use all the time.
Carlos?
Yeah.
Would you mind just translating all of them so we know what all of them mean?
Oh, yeah, sure. And so, que haber haverim, as I said, what's new or what's up? Meldar, as I said, it means leer, to read. Escribir is to write, right? As in Spanish, escribir with B. Mashallah, it's an expression that you use when you're very happy about something, right? Mashallah. Dunque or allora means so, right? Donc or allora, so. Agora vamos a ver, now, agora, vamos, we are going to, ver, see. Now we're going to see the next chapter, the next idea, the next explanation, right? Agora vamos a ver esto. ¿Estás de acuerdo? Do you agree? ¿Cuál pensas? What do you think? Right? What do you, cuál, and think in the second person singular, pensas. ¿Estás seguro? Are you sure? And then kol hakavod, congratulations, right? With all the honor, all the kavod, right? Barry?
Carlos, just looking at that script, it seems that a yud is used to represent the an e sound,
Yes.
rather than an I sound. Is there a different letter that's used for I?
Yeah, so if we go back to the table here, you can see that the yud, number 13 here, in the second range, second one to the right, the yod can be, we say yod, we don't say yud, right? As in Yiddish, we say yod, and it can be an I or an E. There is no a priori way of telling whether it's going to be an I or an E. It depends. You have to know the word for you to be able to read a Ladino word in Rashi and know whether it's I or E. Okay, and sometimes both possibilities are correct or could be correct, as in mi and me, or ti and te, personal pronouns in Ladino, but only one makes sense from the grammatical perspective. And same with a buff. A buff, which you can see here, here number 8, can be a U or an O. In fact, if we go down this rabbit hole, you want to see the whole explanation, let me show you. I'm going to publish an article about this year, but let me show you the complexity. See here? So a buff, technically, can be a V, as in a consonant, as in some Hebrew words, or an O, or a U, or even a W in some Ladino texts. The he can be this. The I in the Latin alphabet can be all these three. So there's a lot of inequivalencies between Rashi and the Latin alphabet, yes. But the most important one is the one you asked me about, the yod being the E or the E, and the baf being the O and the U. Yeah. Okay. That's why there's so many schools of thought as to how to Romanize Ladino from Hebrew scripts, right? Because there's so many ways of instantiating it. Okay. Common words, yes. More questions about common words? Más temáticas?
What's the word in the first line? The haverim. It doesn't look like haverim in the.
Right, because that final mem in Rashi looks like a samech, right?
Oh, okay.
That's what I think is causing confusion. Yeah. It's if you go to the table, it's also like that, right? See here, number 19 almost looks like a samech.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. As a mem sofit, right? Only when it occupies the last position. Otherwise, it's like 18. Like this mem, which is more recognizable. Okay. What else? Common forms of greeting. How do we greet people? These are the saludicos. So saludo, we're going to write it in the chat. Saludo is like in modern Spanish, it is a greeting, right? Now we add the suffix ico, which means little, and it's typical of Aragonese. I'm from Aragon in Spain, so I'm very familiarized with this. And it's also used in Ladino. So saludicos is little greetings. It doesn't mean that they're small in the literal sense. It's just a way of softening the tone. Okay, so different ways of saying this. Who would like to try to say some of these? I would like somebody to try and say the first two, for instance. Need some volunteers.
Buenos dias doesn't look too difficult.
And then the second one.
De mañana buena y clara.
This is an uber Sephardic greeting, right? Literally means good and clear morning. De mañana is morning, which is not to be mistaken for a mañana, which means tomorrow. I wrote it in the chat. A mañana is tomorrow, but de mañana is morning. Buena, good, y clara, clear. It's a very poetic way of saying good morning. And the next two, someone different. Who would like to read this next two?
Well, here it feels like the question of what is that vav?
This one?
So
No, the vav. Where?
Jos, yeah, in the first one.
Oh, yes, yes. Yes, so I was going to talk about this, so it's a very good observation. Now, is there such thing as gender neutral or inclusive language in Ladino? Well, there wasn't before Ladino 21, even before my company. But I think it is a trend in Jewish languages, obviously influenced by other languages and the current state of affairs. And it's just used by more and more people in Ladino. And it's just meant to include both men and women in this case, right? With the at. Other ways of doing this that are not exactly the same would be the use of the e, as in vinides. That is both male, woman, and any other thing. Right? It can be non-binary. It can be whatever. So it's more inclusive than the at that I use there. Or even this, taken from modern Spanish, the X, right? To indicate the placeholder. That again is maximally inclusive. So not everybody agrees with this, but it's an incipient embryonic trend in Ladino. Yes. So how do you pronounce this? You say vinides, you pronounce it like an E. If you don't mean a specific gender, if you're only greeting females, then you say vinidas. If you're only greeting males, you say vinidos. Con bueno, okay? Which means welcome. So, come, venir, con bueno. Well, good. ¿Cuál más? When we want to thank God for something, who wants to read that one?
Is it bendijo el Dio?
Right, almost. So, right, so we have this ch sound. It will be bendicho el Dio. Bendicho, right? So when we have, you see the gimel here in Rashi? So without apostrophe, without that rafe, that diacritic, it will be bendigo. But with the diacritic, it becomes bendicho. Bendicho.
And does that word come from like benediction? Is that what the bendicio comes from? Or yeah.
I think both have a common root in Latin, right? And which is why also you can find it in other Romance languages. It's an irregular past participle in modern Spanish. It should be bendito, and it's sometimes used as bendito, but here is bendicho so it comes from decir, right? Dicere in Latin. So I think that's why it's used in both English and Ladino and Spanish. When you want to say see you soon, this is also a very Sephardic greeting. We say alvermos, literally until the next time we see, ver, each other, mos, us, right? Alvermos, and that can be can be tomorrow, it can be 5 years, whatever. Alvermos. Saludes, greetings, mucho gusto is very similar. This one is tricky. Who wants to try it? This one. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
So would it be tuve mucho placer?
Okay, muy bueno. Tuve, or we can also say tuvi, is a dialectal variation. Tuvi mucho placer. Tuvi mucho placer, right? It's a zayin, just like you pronounce it. Placer, right? Tuvi mucho placer. Literally, I had a lot of pleasure. I derived a lot of pleasure from making your acquaintance. Okay. ¿Cómo te llamas? Okay, this is almost the same as in Spanish. The Y is slightly softer than the double L in modern Spanish. So in Spanish, we would say, ¿Cómo te llamas? ¿Cómo te llamas? That's Spanish. Ladino is, ¿Cómo te llamas? Llamas. A bit more protracted, slightly softer. When we're very happy about something, we want to say great. We say maravillas, literally meaning wonders. Wonders, not wonderful, but wonders. When you want to express that something is wonderful. If you wanted to say wonderful, it would be maravilloso. Maravilloso, right? Maravillas is just wonders. And finally, when somebody asks you for a favor and you want to say that sure, that you'll do it gladly, you say seguro, literally meaning sure, right? Of course. Can you give me £1 million? Seguro, right? That kind of thing. Okay. Demandicas, questions about this? We say demanda means question.
Sorry, Carlos, could you break down the grammar of tuve mucho placer?
Yes, so it's the first person of the past simple from the verb tener, right? So tener is to have. So if you say tuve or tuvi, it means I had. So I had mucho, right? A lot. Notice the difference with Peninsular Spanish mucho. This is mucho, meaning a lot. And then placer, meaning pleasure, right?
Yeah,
pleasure.
thank you. It was that first word that confused me.
Okay, yeah.
That was a past.
Yeah. Yeah, tuve. And the past simple is different in Spanish and Ladino. From the perspective of modern Spanish, it looks archaic, but from a perspective indigenous to Ladino itself, it's not archaic at all because it's very much used every day, right? So when people say that there are archaisms in Ladino, we have to take it with a pinch of salt because from the lenses of Ladino itself, these are not archaisms to the extent that we use them every day. Okay. All right, individual self-presentations. So now I need your help because it's individual self-presentations. It doesn't say Carlos self-presentations. Okay, so here you have a plethora of options and I will ask you to just choose one and introduce yourself. So let me translate them. And once you know the translation, you can use whichever, okay? I'll ask each of you to just use one sentence. So your favorite sentence. So salud y berajá means health and berajá, right? Blessings, right? But it's just used to say hello, right? When you want to say hello to somebody, you say salud y berajá. It's very elegant, but it means exactly the same as hello. Though literally is health, salud, and blessing, berajá. Or shalom, right? Peace, but then again, it just means hello. So you say shalom, or even shalom, shalom. If you want to be more friendly, right? Kind of the same as in Chinese when you mention the same word twice to sound a bit, to soften the blow. Que haber bre, it means que haber. We already saw that. Do you remember haber? Haber.
What's new?
What's new? And bre is just an interjection that is used in Serbian and other Balkanic language to say you. Que haber bre? What's up, you? What's going on? So it's very informal, right? We go from formal, salud y berajat, to just neutral, shalom or shalom, shalom, more friendly, to the even more friendly, que haber bre. Okay.
Is there any use of the third person in Ladino for you?
Yes. If you want to use the formal you would use it the third person. So again, this is almost not used by anybody nowadays, but back in the day it was pretty popular to use the third person, but no as usted. So we have usted, right, in modern Spanish. You can find, if you want to, you can find one or two texts out of the millions and gazillions of texts in Ladino history where you have an equivalent of usted. Okay. But by and large, what you will find is third person singular. So if I want to say you walk, and I want to use the formal way of addressing you, I would say él camina, meaning you, formal, walk. But it's exactly the same form as he walks, él camina, right? And if I want to say she, if I want to say you for a female, right, I would say ella camina. It means you in the formal, but it's also the same, exactly the same as third person singular feminine, right? So that's how you use it. You use exactly él o ella. You don't use usted, but it's still conjugated as a third person singular, just like usted. Okay. So, mi nombre o alcuña es. This is very, very, very important. Alcuña means surname, right? Means surname. It comes from cuña. You know, in English, when you say coinage of something, of say a concept or a coin, that's what it means. So your origin, that where you come from, your coinage is your surname, right? It's the alcuña. And you can say both nombre or alcuña. So nombre is just first name, and alcuña will be only surname. Okay. So for instance, I'm Carlos Yebra. So mi nombre es Carlos. Mi alcuña es Yebra.
Is alcuña a word in Spanish still?
No. You have alcuña with you have alcurnia. Alcurnia, but not alcuña. You have alcurnia.
No, it's a current word. It's a current word in Portuguese.
Alcurnia?
Yes.
Yeah, it's also a word in modern Spanish, but in modern Spanish is a cultism. It's a very formal word. Okay. So you can say that somebody is the alta alcurnia to say that he comes from a wealthy lineage.
It's basically, in Portuguese, it means nickname.
Nickname. Oh, right. No, in here it's a surname.
Okay.
It's a surname, yeah. It cannot be a nickname, yeah. Interesting semantic displacement, yes. So mi alcuña es Yebra. Me llamo, right? Literally, I am called, but figuratively, my name is, same as modern Spanish, but with a Y. So de, it means I am from, but we dropped the last Y. So it's so as opposed to soy. So de, I am from, for instance, so de España, I'm from Spain. Here we use élève in French, which means student, right? So I am a student at the University of whatever. So elevo, if it's male student, so elevais is female student, if it's female student. For instance, so elevo de Yiddish en la Universidad de Londra. I am a student of Yiddish in the University of London. London is Londra, as in Italian. Londra, I wrote it in the chat, Londra. Lavoro como, I think you know it's Italian, yeah, very.
Sorry, just to go back to that difference between elevo and eleva. Yeah, and to pick up the non-binary point that you were speaking about earlier today, is there a way of non-gendering gendered words like those that end in or?
Yes, as I said, you can if you want to include both genders, you do the at. But if you want to non-gender it, to de-gender it, then you would just use the E, eleve, or the X. Now, the problem with the X is that there's no way to pronounce it. You cannot say elevix. You can, but you wouldn't. So the X is a placeholder. It depends on the context, whether you're going to say elevo, eleva, or eleve. It allows for all three combinations. I think eleve is easier to use, and it's non-gendered by definition. It's non-binary. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
Okay, great. So lavoro is both a noun, but also the first person singular present simple conjugation, right? So I work. I work as, lavoro como, blah, blah, blah. For instance, lavoro como profesor. I work as a teacher or professor, right? Lavoro como profesor. We use the same word for teacher and professor. Lavoro como profesor. Lavoro como advogado, lawyer. And finally, some people don't labora, do not work, right? They are retired. So, estoy pensionado, pensionada, pensionade, right? Je suis en pension, we say in French, right? I'm retired. I'm literally living off the pension, right? Estoy pensionado, pensionado. Okay, so we have time for, we can introduce ourselves. So each of us, let's just pick one sentence and go with that.
Mi alcuña es Gómez da Costa.
Perfect. Mi alcuña es Gómez da Costa. Marcela. Muy bueno. My surname is Gómez da Costa. Yeah, if you have like, say, suppose you have two surnames, like me, I have two surnames, right? Yebra and López. So you can say mi alcuña es, and then the two surnames, right? My surname is and Yebra López. Mi alcuña es Yebra López. So if you write Gómez, separated from da, separated from Costa, your alcuña is still Gómez da Costa. Yeah.
Well done you for getting it right. Nobody else does.
I know. I feel your pain. I believe in.
The name in England is a pain in the butt.
I know. They think it's a middle name. Your first surname.
Yeah, exactly. And they abbreviate it.
Yeah, they call me López all the time. Yeah, even my bank calls me López in the US. ¿Qué más? Who else?
Carlos, the black box is still right in the middle. So
Oh yeah, sorry, I have to chat. Yeah,
the dating factor.
gets me every time. Yeah. Who else?
Salud y braja.
Okay, great. Salud y beraja. I reciprocate in the greeting. Very well pronounced. Who else?
Well, I have mine written for me in the chat already. Lavoro como profesor.
Right, but that will be gendered, right? So we will add an a, just like in modern Spanish, right? So
hola.
Laboro como profesora.
Como profesora.
Yeah. Laboro como profesora. Ande, where? Okay.
Yeah.
Have it here, right?
Estou pensionado.
Okay, it will be en la Universidad de Londres, right? Okay, estoy pensionado. Okay, perfecto. I'm retired. Yeah.
Carlos, where did you learn Ladino? At home, or have you acquired it as a second language?
I began. I learned about the existence, not the language, but about the very existence of the language in 2014 while I was presenting a book in Yad Vashem, right? The World Center for the Remembrance of the Holocaust. And then I started my PhD in New York City. So I contacted the local community there, and I learned them from them, plus the internet Ladino Comunidad, which is an email list with that is written exclusively in Ladino with people all over the world. So a combination of those two. And I also learned Solitreo, the cursive script, from Sephardim themselves in New York. Yeah. And the digital archive that I have about Ladino 21, is on YouTube, more than 200 videos exclusively in Ladino for free. It started because the people that I met in New York City wanted to tell their story in Ladino and wanted for people all over the world to listen to Ladino and to know about Ladino. Yeah. Okay. This stop pensionada, I included it because most of Ladino speakers are 60-plus-year-old, which means there are more people that are pensionada than people who work. So this is very useful. Okay. By the way, I already said that I teach Ladino at Oxford. Let me add that I teach that is for free to students, and any of you can apply to be a student if you wish this summer, to be a student next academic year. I'll be happy to consider your application. Barry.
Well, this is getting slightly more technical, but if one knows Spanish,
Yes.
How confident can you be that just using the same word will get you the Ladino equivalent? So, for example,
you can
could I say "Soy de Inglaterra" and probably be right?
Yeah, you drop the Y from modern Spanish, right? It was in modern Spanish, it would be "Soy de Inglaterra." But yeah, I mean, even if you were to say "Soy de Inglaterra," you will be understood by Ladino speakers. If you say "Soy de Inglaterra," you'll be understood by modern Spanish. So let me say this: you can be more confident than Yiddish speakers who will want to communicate with German speakers but do not speak German, right? So, in other words, Ladino is closer to modern Spanish than Yiddish to German. So it's pretty close.
Okay. Now I've got a slightly more complicated question. If you know Yiddish,
yes,
how confident can you be that you could use the same Hebrew-derived word in Ladino and you would be using the correct word? So, for example,
I know. So if you use a Hebrew word that is used in Yiddish and you just implement it into Ladino,
exactly.
Why? I would say it's 50-50 because Yiddish has many more Hebrew words than Ladino. So if you say mishpoche, it wouldn't fly. We say familia, right? If you say chaber, it would fly. It's chaber. So yeah, I think that Slavic words for sure wouldn't 95% wouldn't work in Ladino, and Hebrew words I would say 50-50. From what I know about Yiddish, which is Yiddish for beginners.
Fair enough. Sorry, on that point, do you have any sense statistically of how much of Ladino is Romance derived and how much is derived from Hebrew? I mean, just in terms of vocabulary.
Yeah. I mean, roughly we could say that 80% is Castilian rather than Spanish, right? This is important because we normally pre-exposure we speak about Ibero-Romance languages rather than Spanish. Spanish is an imperial creation that comes as standardized way later, right? And by that time, there are no more Sephardic communities in peninsular Spain. So Ladino is 80% Castilian, and then other Romance languages to a way lesser degree, for instance, Catalan, Aragonese, Portuguese, French, Italian. Those together with Turkisms and Hebraisms are the 20%. And within that 20%, I would say that Turkish words are the majority, and then Hebrew words, and then non-peninsular Romance languages. So French.
So
Italian.
does that mean, Carlos, that Cervantes and a Ladino speaker would be perfectly intelligible to each other?
I mean, they would still be mutually intelligible if Cervantes had been born today. So the intelligibility is out of question. Okay, two things. So many people think that Ladino is the language of Cervantes. That's a myth, right? So Cervantes was...
That's a myth, you say?
Yeah, it's a myth. Cervantes published his Hauptwerk, right? His main works in 1606 and 1615, and the exposures were in 1492. And the language as a spoken vernacular was developed in diaspora in virtual isolation from the Iberian Peninsula. But we're talking about two different registers. Are there words in common that they became archaisms in modern Spanish but were preserved in Ladino, such as es menester? Yes. but you cannot say that there's a 100% overlap or even a 90% overlap. And the second question, sorry, was no, it's the second point that I wanted to make, but it wasn't the second question. If I get to it, I'll let you know. So I'm reading a question from Ari. We're running out of time, but I'm doing what I can with what I have. My dad's family are Sephardic Jews from Aleppo, Syria. There is a story that goes in the family that my dad's mom owned, I think, will always ask her brother in Ladino, ¿comites? ¿Qué comites? ¿Comites bueno? ¿Qué dice Razel? Okay, it will be ¿qué dice, right? Dishes for the past. So, ¿qué dice Rachel? I just wanted to check whether this is correct, Judesmo. Okay, I do not believe in prescriptivist categories, but yeah, let me see whether this is idiomatic or not idiomatic. So, comites, yes, it's idiomatic and it means did you eat? Meaning did you eat at all, right? ¿Qué comites? Meaning what did you eat? That's also idiomatic. Comites bueno, that is also idiomatic. Did you eat well? And ¿qué dice Rachel? Doesn't exist. It will be either ¿qué dijo Rachel? What did Rachel say? Let me write it in the chat. ¿Qué dijo Rachel? Rachel is pronounced Rachel, but it's written with a C. ¿Qué dijo Rachel? Or ¿qué dice Rachel? That will be present tense. It's one of those. But that mixture of dice wouldn't be used. The rest, yes, exactly like you wrote it. Comites, ¿qué comites? Comites bueno. It was meant in the past tense. So that will be ¿qué dijo? With an O at the end. Rachel. Okay. I have 3 minutes. Okay, let me see what I can do with 3 minutes. See here the verbs ser and estar. Excuse me. So estar is very similar. The only difference being second person plural. Anytime we have a second person plural present simple in Ladino is going to end in a shin. So it's sosh and stash. And that's the main difference vis-a-vis modern Spanish, right? Vosotros estáis, or vosotras estáis, sois, right? But not sosh or stash. The personal pronouns are fairly similar. The main difference being the end-to-M change, right? Instead of nosotros, mo, mosotros. And the S to zayin, right? Mosotros. That end-to-M change, we see it a lot. Instead of nuevo in Spanish, nuevo, we say muevo with an M to say new, right? Nuevo, muevo. 9, 9, mueve in Ladino. Change from N to M. Again, inclusive language. Numbers, fairly similar. And dialogue. I had this, it's a pity there's only 1 minute left because I had this crazy good dialogue between Moshe and Rachel so that I would take a female and a male speaking in Ladino. Moshe and Rachel. It's just basic greetings, right? It's no new vocabulary, but it was fun. And we have 1 minute left, and let me see. So this is what I suggest we do. Let's stay in touch. And this is a project of collaboration that I would like to do with all of you, but it's entirely optional. And these are the instructions. So I would like you to introduce yourself in Ladino by first writing a text based on the slides. I think Shirley can share the slides, but otherwise I can send it to all of you. Very happy to do so that you have everything we saw today with you. And then you can record a video of you introducing yourself in Ladino on the basis of the text. You can always send me the text for me to edit it before you actually record it. And no more than 5 minutes, right? It cannot last more than 5 minutes. And then you can upload it in this website that we have created for this project, London Ladino, and where we would see other Sephardic Jews from London speaking their first words in Ladino. So that would be really nice to see. It's completely optional. I do encourage you to do it. And that's it. That's the website, Ladino21. And merci mucho. Merci mucho, which means thank you very much. Merci, right? That's in the French. Merci, but with an S, and mucho, a lot.
That's wonderful, Carlos. And can I just clarify, since you spoke about London, Sephardim in London, and we have people among us who are not from London, presumably you're happy to have people.
Yes, yes, of course. This is an inclusive project. Yeah.
And if people would like copies of the slides or links or to be in touch with Carlos, please drop me an email and I'm very happy to connect you. And just a very quick thank you once again, Carlos. That was terrific. So lovely to learn from you, and you're obviously sharing with us just the tip of the iceberg. You have such a wealth of knowledge.
Yes.
It's wonderful. So thank you again for taking the time to come and talk to us. That's really wonderful. Our next talk at the Sir Martin Gilbert Learning Center is in a very different subject, the art of Winston Churchill. That's going to be by our very popular speaker, Lee Pollock. That's on Thursday, the 2nd of March at 7 p.m. London time. So I hope to see you then or at some other time again soon. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks so much again, Carlos.
Thank you, everybody.
Can you send out Carlos's email?
Yes, it's carlos.yebra.lopez@ucl.ac.uk. Muchas gracias, o merci mucho.
David, if you just drop me an email, I'm glad to send that.
Yes, you can coordinate that.
Thank you very much.
Take care, everyone.
Merci mucho. Chao, chao.
Adiós. Adiós.
Nos vemos.